Hello and welcome to the Victory Road to Frankfurt Top Cut featuring GG Tour. My name is Jamie Boyt. I'm going to be joined by Maeve Rock and we're going to have some fantastic games for you coming from an absolutely massive tournament. Over 400 players, closing in on 500 players, and now we've narrowed it down to 34 players in this Top Cut.
Yeah, as we spoke earlier before the stream started, this is really close to the size that the Dallas 2020 regionals was. So these players already went through 9 rounds yesterday, and they all had a record of 7-2 or better. So, this is a really grueling day of Pokemon for all 34 players who have been able to make it to this top cut. So they've all got a long way to go, though, just to be able to get it to that finals. And there are a lot of really interesting names on this list.
Yeah, definitely are, and 34 players meant that we did have that little bit extra on the top 32, so we have narrowed that down to our top 32 now. But yeah, some very international names as well. It's really living up to the hype of international tournament just before we have our European international as well. But we can jump over to the match now between two great players here. We're going to be going here for Francesco P. Pero. This is Ryan Loseto, and we're jumping straight into the match because the players are so excited. They have just got on straight away with it. So we've got the Calyrex Zacian, Blastoise, Incineroar, Rillaboom, and Regieleki coming out for Francesco's side, and then Zacian, Kyogre, Zapdos, Incineroar, Grimmsnarl, and Rillaboom for Ryan.
Yeah, and this is the one time I feel like I've seen the one other starter from Gen 1 that, isn't getting as much love as Venusaur and Charizard seem to be in this format. But Blastoise does have that Gigantamax move where you're able to take that extra chip damage, except if you're that Kyogre on the other side of the field. You're not going to worry maybe nearly so much about that. But really interesting for us, Jamie, that we don't have a Sun matchup right out of the gate.
Yes, I am very pleased to see that. That has been the most common team to come out of this format so far, winning so many tournaments, but a nice bit of fresh air to start off this stream with no Sun in sight at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And both of these trainers will be able to start at the very beginning of their day. They've already, I believe, played at least possibly one more match before this. So for the start, though, it's going to be Rillaboom and Grimmsnarl there for Ryan on his side, which is a very reminiscent Series 10 lead for me, while Regieleki and Calyrex, so very quick on the side of Francesco.
Yeah, Regieleki and Calyrex usually indicates that you want to be Dynamaxing the Regieleki, getting some very powerful max moves off, and potentially a Max Darkness as well. This is a closed team sheets format. Usually on the online ones we've had open team sheets, but we are replicating like it is going to be in the international. This is closed, so we don't actually know what's going to be coming out from this Regieleki, and neither does the opponent. So it's going to be interesting to see what is going to be coming out from both sides. The Regieleki could just be faked out by either Pokemon, potentially. The Rillaboom and Grimmsnarl both have access to it, but you want to be wary of going for that in the face of a potential Dynamax from the Regieleki. If you go for that max, you can overwrite the grassy terrain. There will be no more priority grassy glides from the Rillaboom either. The Calyrex isn't in the greatest of spots unless it is carrying that Will-O-Wisp. You do want to be Will-O-Wisping either of these Pokemon. If you Will-O-Wisp the Grimmsnarl, then any Dark type moves from the Grimmsnarl probably won't be picking up the knockout anymore. You'd really be hampering that Rillaboom as well, but here comes the Dynamax turn 1.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that it looks like it's out of a fastball, Jamie, if I'm not mistaken. So that looks like it's probably going to be that Regieleki right out of the gate. Going to be able to, like you said, to possibly override this grassy terrain and maybe future grassy glides to protect that Kyogre that is running in the back there, to protect against anything in the back there for Francesco. And that is still going to be one of the faster Pokemon. But Ryan is actually going for a Dynamax or a Gigantamax of his own. Both of the Pokemon on his side are Gigantamax capable. Probably most likely going to be that Rillaboom, and yeah, it is that Rillaboom going to be able to bring on some G-Max drum beating as well, and that is going to be able to do, a pretty decent chunk of damage and go through either of these Pokemon and continue to keep that grassy terrain alive if he's trying to do something like that here. Grimmsnarl, though, is actually going for a Thunder Wave onto the Calyrex, going to start slowing that down immediately and hoping for a full paralysis on something like that Astral Barrage. Max Electric type move here into that Grimmsnarl does a ton of damage, brings it down to about 3/4 of its HP, a little bit higher than that, and does change that terrain to boost the power of its electric type moves in the future here. So this Rillaboom may be going for something like a Max Strike later, but this Astral Barrage is enough to take out that Grimmsnarl for now. Wasn't able to do a whole lot besides that one Thunder Wave, but you have to hope it pays off later, and that Grim Boost is going to be absolutely huge moving into the further turns of this game, because if there is something like a Max Quake here into this Regieleki, that is going to do a ton of damage, but Regieleki is still able to hang on thanks to being Dynamaxed.
That was a very interesting turn there. The Rillaboom still under speed in the Calyrex, even though it got paralyzed by that Thunder Wave. So quite a slow Rillaboom coming out, and it was able to boost up its special defense even further with that Max Quake. So it's really going to be able to take on both these Pokemon. We'll still have to see if the Regieleki is going to be physical or special. It does tend to be run more physical if you are pairing it up with the Calyrex, because you do like to have that assurance on there to get the Max Darkness, but we can't really see at the moment what kind of Regieleki that's going to be. It's still doing some very significant damage. Taking care of the Grimmsnarl has taken away any of the potential screens that could be coming out, and the Thunder Waves are no longer going to be in play. The Regieleki has overwritten the grassy terrain now as well. It's got its electric terrain out, and when the electric terrain is on the field, it does have the potential to just knock out Zacian in one shot with a Max Lightning, so it does have to be very careful here. And the fact that the Calyrex is still outspeeding the Rillaboom means that it still will be able to get an attack off before the Rillaboom goes for another Max move. If it does still have access to the Willows that we see on a lot of Calyrex, that would really hamper that Rillaboom, especially because it is using its Gigantamax already. So the Zacian definitely has to be wary as well. I'll have to see if there's any kind of quick attack coming out on Zacian that has been picking up in popularity a bit. And Regieleki is looking pretty low. It is definitely one of the frailest Pokemon we have, so it could potentially be in range of a quick attack if that's going to be coming out from the Zacian. But because these are the closed team sheets, we don't actually know what's going to be coming out, so we don't actually have all this information, which is quite a breath of fresh air going into these tournaments on online.
Yeah, Zacian is going to do the safe thing here and just go for a Protect, while there is another Max Lightning onto that Zacian slot. Even through the Protect, it still feels like it does a lot of damage. And then there's going to be a... oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. There is that Will-O-Wisp there onto the Rillaboom, not onto the Zacian slot, predicting that Protect, while the G-Max Drum Beating into that Calyrex does a ton of damage, brings it down to under half of its HP, and takes a little bit of burn damage as it goes. Really interesting to see how much damage that would have done had there not been the burn.
You can see why players do run a little bit of speed on the Rillaboom. It doesn't really take too much training to get that Rillaboom to outspeed the Calyrex, but underspeeding here means that the Drum Solo was really not doing as much damage to that Calyrex as it should. You don't actually reveal if there's any Focus Sash on the Calyrex as well, because you overwrit the grassy terrain. The Drum Solo is doing even less damage in that regard as well. And you've got a nice chunk of damage onto the Zacian, and it would definitely be in range of another Max Lightning here. That's probably why it's switching out into that Incineroar.
Yeah, and Incineroar is going to be able to put on some fake out pressure possibly if it needs to later, but most importantly, just getting that Zacian in and out of this match before taking something like another Will-O-Wisp or another Max Lightning. So this Max Lightning onto the Incineroar, oh my god, this Regieleki is absolutely so strong. A ton of damage and a full paralysis there from the Calyrex, not able to handle any sort of damage output later, and another Max Quake into the Regieleki is enough to finish it off. So I think a really good usage of the Dynamax turns from all for both of these Pokemon.
Yeah, it's taking care of the Regieleki very nicely. That was the main thing that was threatening the Zacian, and with the Calyrex being paralyzed now, that's no longer going to be a threat to the Zacian. It'll be able to just outspeed KO with the Behemoth Blade, especially because any potential Sash has been broken on the Calyrex as well. But the Rillaboom now is not going to be doing too much damage. It's lost access to its Drum Solo, and usually that's off of Grassy Glide, which is significantly weaker, and especially because the Grass Terrain is not on the field, it won't even have that priority either. With Zacian coming in, you do get to switch in after the Incineroar is already hit the field, so it's not going to be intimidated. It's going to be at its full strength with that +1 from the Intrepid Sword straight away. And because the Calyrex still outspeeds the Rillaboom after the paralysis still, even if you go for the fake out this turn into the Zacian, the Calyrex would most likely be able to get off another attack if it can fight through that paralysis and get another Astral Barrage maybe onto the field. Put both Pokemon in range of any of the other attacks that the Zacian wants to go for. You've got a nice chunk on the Incineroar with that Max Lightning as well. That means that it's definitely going to be in range of whatever the Zacian would want to go for, whether it goes for a player off or a fighting type move. And that's even going to be the case if the Incineroar manages to switch back out and intimidate the Zacian now. So you do have to be very careful of the Zacian on Francesco's side of the field. Really, your only way through it is going to be your own Zacian on Ryan's side of the field. So you do need to be positioning yourself very carefully here to try and get that Zacian on the field safely. Hard switching out the Incineroar into that Zacian, it could be taking some attacks here.
Yeah, but most importantly, that means there's no fake out. So Francesco here has to maybe see if he can make that call to not protect, which he did not, because there is going to be a close combat onto that Zacian there. Sorry, a Sacred Sword onto that Zacian and an Astral Barrage from this Calyrex onto both of these Pokemon. No full paralysis, and that is going to do a ton of damage, able to knock out that Zacian, so it gets another Grimnade boost after it already had one from that knockout on the Grimmsnarl earlier. So now this Calyrex is in a really nice position, I think, to wrap up the end of this game, as the Rillaboom here goes for a high horsepower into the Zacian, but it doesn't do a ton of damage because that burn has just been taking away at its attack.
Yeah, that burn has been very impactful on the Rillaboom. That's not really going to be able to break through that Zacian very easily. With the Incineroar coming back in, you get your Intimidates and you get the Fake Out pressure once again, but you sacrifice the only real way of breaking through the opposing Zacian now. The Incineroar gets the Intimidate, but with Sacred Sword, that should still easily be enough to pick up the knockout on the opposing Incineroar. The Rillaboom, even if it gets another high horsepower off, it's probably going to take another couple to knock out the Zacian, and it may even require another 3. So, yeah, there's not going to be too much that Ryan can do here. He's going to be forfeiting, and Francesco is going to take the first game.
Yeah, and I honestly don't even mind the forfeit, because if you're trying to preserve, if you're carrying something like a Chople Berry on your Incineroar, maybe you don't want to reveal that just yet. It could be something to maybe pay attention going into game 2, but I think for Ryan, I almost wish that he had a different timing for his Gigantamax at the time, but, you know, could be a Dynamax maybe in the next game. I almost wish he held on to that a little bit later.
Well, getting the Thunder Wave onto the Calyrex was very nice, but if your Rillaboom can outspeed the Calyrex still, then you'd be able to get those Quakes before the Astral Barrage hits you. You'll be able to attack before any of the Will-O-Wisp could come out from the Calyrex as well, so just needs to be a little bit faster on the Rillaboom. Seems to be prioritizing bulk there, and you can see that the Rillaboom was able to stick on the field the entire match, but because it wasn't able to outspeed that Calyrex with the after the Thunder Wave paralysis, it wasn't able to get off the damage it needed before that burn, and the burn was very impactful. Whenever your Dynamax Pokemon gets status like that, it does hamper it very, very much, and you could see it there. The Rillaboom's Grassy Terrain got overwritten on the first turn, so it wasn't even going to be able to get that boost from the Drum Solo as well. I did go for a couple of Max Quakes into the opposing Regieleki, but you could see that just one Max Quake, even as frail as Regieleki, was not enough to pick up the KO on that Pokemon either, so it does very freely get to just go for that Max Lightning in the face of that Rillaboom, be able to override that terrain and be able to shrug off the attack from the Rillaboom as well. Then you just get to ignore it with the Will-O-Wisp as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that we can see as well is that Regieleki is carrying what has to be Bounce, right? So it does have another option for speed control in that Max Airstream. It didn't end up using that last time, especially even with the Rillaboom on the opposite side of the field, which I think is a really interesting piece of information that Ryan doesn't know that we do. So, you know, it's something that you kind of have to move forward. We're also, and then that shows it is that that Assault Vest on the Regieleki. So a little bit of a different set than maybe we see. We do see a lot of Focus Sash and some Life Orb as well in these formats. But, you know, it kind of, you've got a team where you've got two different Pokemon in that Calyrex and that Regieleki who both would be comfortable carrying a Focus Sash. So then you wonder, is it Spell Tag on the Calyrex because you weren't able to confirm if it was the Focus Sash? So now I think that there is still a lot of information that Ryan needs to get from Francesco to kind of be able to play optimally in this game too.
Yeah, there was a lot of information preserved in that match, so it will be interesting to see what the adaptation could be coming out from Ryan. The Grimmsnarl was nice getting the Thunder Wave off, but maybe if it goes for any of those screens that it usually carries as well, that would put a stop to the damage that could come out from the opposing Calyrex and the Regieleki, because it lost the Grimmsnarl straight away on that first turn for the paralysis on the Calyrex, but then it still was just outspeeding the Pokemon, so it didn't come into play too much other than that, just one paralysis. But here comes a Kyogre here. That's going to be doing a lot more damage than that Rillaboom could do. It's going to be still in the face of the Regieleki and the Calyrex, so the Kyogre does have to be very careful of these Max Lightnings that can come out. But if the Grimmsnarl is carrying something like the Reflect All the Light screen, then it will be able to keep that Kyogre safe. You've got to assume that the Regieleki is going to be carrying most likely a physical attack on the Regieleki with its Lightnings, because it does most commonly carry that when it comes to being paired with the Calyrex. So if you go for a Reflect here and a Dynamax on the Kyogre, you should be able to shrug off any of the attacks that the Pokemon want to go for. From Regieleki, it's going to be taking a huge amount of damage even in the Dynamax from that opposing Kyogre. Like we have seen, we've got the sneak peek of the Assault Vest, so even if it does go for the Dynamax, it'll probably be able to take the Max Geyser that could come out from the opposing Kyogre as well. You do have to worry about the Calyrex as well, because if you just ignore it, it's going to be able to just start launching off those Astral Barrages and still doing the very nice damage, get the Will-O-Wisp off onto the Grimmsnarl, so that any Spirit Breaks or Foul Plays won't be doing as much damage to the opposing Calyrex as well. But it's still a very offensive lead coming out from Francesco here, and still going to be turning on the offense with that Dynamax again, turn 1.
Yeah, that Dynamax Regieleki, we saw how much pressure it put on in that game 1 and how important it was for him to be able to maximize the usage of his Dynamax turns. He went for 3 Max Lightnings in a row, so no crazy secondary effects there, but it is going to continue to be helpful if he is able to get another one off and change that terrain again. Possibly a Rillaboom in the back for Ryan, maybe trying to swap that terrain around and maybe allow for some priority Grassy Glide. But Ryan will be going for a Dynamax of his own, assuming it is that Kyogre, like you said, does not want to be taking something like a Max Lightning from that Regieleki, which would easily be enough to knock out if it wasn't in that Dynamax form, possibly depending on the item it's carrying. But it's also going to show here too, you know, this Kyogre is going to be able to do a ton of damage, but only onto one of these two targets, unless it, you know, it isn't able to use something like a water spout, but here instead that reflect is going to be able to stop some of this damage from this max lightning onto this Kyogre, and that is still a ton of damage, but it does not even bring it down to its bottom quarter of its HP, but it's not going to be able to deal another one of those, and it's only able to take its offensive pressure of its own onto one of the two Pokemon on this side. And Astral Barrage, though, onto the Kyogre and the Grimmsnarl does a pretty small chunk of damage to both of them here, but instead a max strike from the Kyogre. Forgive me, I might be wrong there.
Yeah, that's definitely a max strike, so get a very interesting form of speed control. Regieleki's so fast that it should still outspeed the opposing Kyogre, though, and it can't be paralyzed by the Thunder Wave, so Regieleki should still be outspeeding here, and it did so much damage to that opposing Kyogre. I don't speak Italian very well, but based on the damage that the Max Lightning did, it's got to be a physical Regieleki, and it's most likely going to be a light screen coming out there. A Reflect would have probably allowed the Kyogre to take that a little bit more comfortably, because you could see as well that the Astral Barrage did absolutely nothing to the opposing Kyogre, stacked with the light screen, and it seems like the Kyogre would be probably carrying the Assault Vest there, given how little damage it was doing. But that's one of the benefits of running the physical Regieleki. You get to ignore that completely.
Yeah, that Thunder Wave now hitting into that Calyrex, not going to be able to do any sort of major damage if it is able to get that full paralysis. And max airstream from this Regieleki is going to boost that speed back up that the max strike actually ended up mitigating earlier, and that is actually that is a ton of damage just to be able to knock out that Kyogre and get it off the field before it can do anything else here. Another Astral Barrage from the Calyrex onto just the single target of the Grimmsnarl is going to do more damage than last time, but it still doesn't bring that Grimmsnarl down to half.
And so that wasn't a very impactful Dynamax from Ryan, just getting one attack off with the max strike, and then just got completely ignored by the airstream resetting the speeds. So yeah, it's not the best use of the Dynamax. The Regieleki doing way too much damage to that opposing Kyogre. You get to bring in at least something like the Rillaboom that would be able to overwrite the Electric Terrain and go for those Grassy Glides now, or the Zacian that is going to be coming in, but because of that airstream, the Regieleki will still be outspeeding the opposing Zacian. There's nothing that the Grimmsnarl can do about it because it's carrying Thunder Wave, and the Regieleki will just get to go for that Max Lightning once again. It's got the Electric Terrain boost, so that should allow it to be able to pick up the knockout on that opposing Zacian if it does go for it. The Grimmsnarl is definitely going to be in range of that attack as well, but it is going to be switching out probably into that Rillaboom that was most likely going to be in the back. But no, it's going to be Incineroar as well, but that's still going to help because it's going to intimidate the physical Regieleki.
Yeah, that Intimidate is absolutely going to help here and possibly, be able to put on some sort of dark type move pressure onto this Calyrex. Another Max Lightning from this Regieleki who has done a ton of damage and not taken a lot in return, does well over half to that Incineroar thanks to that Electric Terrain, while a Behemoth Blade from the Zacian will be able to do a pretty good chunk of damage to this Regieleki here, and if it is enough to knock it out. So now that Zacian does not have to worry about taking something like another Max Lightning here and able to get rid of probably what was its biggest threat on the field, but you still have to worry about possibly this Calyrex able to get another move off, and it does. That Astral Barrage, no full paralysis once again onto both of these Pokemon. It is enough to just do a little bit to both of them, but again, you're continuing to chip away at this damage, and Francesco still has 3 healthy Pokemon.
Yeah, that chip is very important as well for the opposing Zacian, waiting in the back, because you just need a tiny bit of chip onto opposing Zacians, and then you are able to knock it out in one shot with a Behemoth Blade. So that chip could be putting that Zacian in range there. Not bringing in the Zacian yet for Francesco, going to be going with the Incineroar instead, because there is fake out pressure from Ryan's side of the field, so you can match that with your own Incineroar at this point and get the Intimidate down onto the opposing Zacian. And then you just need a tiny bit more chip onto the Zacian here. If you get another Astral Barrage, it's definitely going to be in range of the Behemoth Blade, maybe even after the Incineroar would maybe switch out and get another Intimidate onto the opposing Zacian. But we know that there's the Grimmsnarl waiting in the back. You may need to get a Thunder Wave at some point onto the opposing Zacian for your own Zacian to be able to break through, because the Incineroar is so low at this point. You could probably take one more Astral Barrage, but then not another one at this point. So you do have to be relying on your own Zacian to be able to win the rest of this game. That might be why Ryan's preserving it and switching it into the Grimmsnarl.
Yeah, that Grimmsnarl able to come in here, getting that Zacian into a little bit of a safer spot, going to take a fake out for its troubles as well. Gets it down to under half of its HP, as it's going to be taking another Astral Barrage from this Calyrex, and that's still, it's continuous chip damage, right? Neither of these Pokemon love taking that here, but instead we're going to be seeing a Burning Jealousy from this Incineroar, I believe, onto both of the Pokemon on Francesco's side.
Burning Jealousy is an interesting one because you can try and get a burn onto the opposing Zacian when it's got its +1 boost, but it's switching out, not even switching in there, so the Burning Jealousy just breaking any of the potential sashes, trying to catch an Zacian switching in maybe. If the Incineroar went for a parting shots and switched into the Zacian that turn, because it got the Intrepid Sword boost that turn, it would still activate the Burning Jealousy, but no switch in for the Zacian there. Instead, the Incineroar has been put incredibly low at this point, probably in range of another Astral Barrage, and I see a screen there that started with an R, so it was most likely the light screen that was set up previously.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, and my Italian is absolutely terrible. So this Reflect is going to be able to stop some damage. Grimstar was able to hang on, but it's not too worried with that Reflect for that special attacker like Calyrex, because that light screen was really doing a lot more work earlier in the game. So apologies again, my Italian is terrible, along with my English. There's going to be a Flare Blitz here, though, from the Incineroar into the Grimstar. That's going to be enough for that knockout. Not able to get that knockout with the Calyrex, so you wouldn't be able to get a +2 Grim Nay boost, but the +1 is still pretty nice as this Zacian is able to come in. And, you know, Electric Terrain is now gone off of the field. It doesn't really matter because none of these Pokemon are running Electric type moves.
Yeah, the Zacian on its own is probably not going to be able to do it at this point. You've got to be able to take out the Incineroar with your fighting type attack. You're not intimidated at this point, so you probably will be able to. But then you're ignoring the Calyrex. You might have to rely on some full paralysis and then outspeeding and being able to knock out the opposing Zacian in one shot. But Incineroar is still pretty healthy. It could be surviving a Sacred Sword depending on how it is trained. A lot of Incineroars do opt to run enough defense to be able to survive this attack. But Substitute is going to be the move of choice here. Probably banking on some full paralysis coming out from the opposing Calyrex. But that's not going to be happening here. The Substitute is just going to disappear straight away.
Francesco, I believe, has only gotten one full paralysis this entire game, which is really unfortunate for Ryan because you're really playing those odds, not getting the luck that I think Ryan really needed here. Incineroar going for a parting shot, pretty safe move to bring in your own Zacian, get that attack drop onto the Zacian on the opponent's side, allow your Zacian to come in, get that Intrepid Sword boost, and really just comfortably finish this game off if needed, and allow yourself to continue to swap in and intimidate if you're, you know, if you end up losing your own Calyrex possibly.
Yeah, it's a pretty safe plays from Francesco here. Flare Blitz would have still done it, but this is still going to be absolutely fine. You get to intimidate the Zacian as well. At any point with your Incineroar, you can switch it in this turn if you wanted. You can just wait for one of your Pokemon to get knocked out to be able to get that Intimidate down. But yeah, it's just going to be going on the offense. The Zacian on Francesco's side is outspeeding and getting the Behemoth played off, so that is going to take care of the game and win the set for Francesco.
Yeah, a really nice play in game two. I liked the adjustments that Ryan brought. I thought bringing the Kyogre was a really interesting move, but I think just facing off against a Regieleki right out of the gate is Kyogre's least favorite place in the format. Maybe besides a Regieleki Rillaboom right out of the gate, right? Just dealing with something like a Grassy Glide and then a Max Lightning. So, you know, the Kyogre, I think, almost wasn't able to do exactly what Ryan needed it to do because that Regieleki was just such an offensive threat, and Francesco's lead was so offensive. Having both a Calyrex and a Regieleki, you know, the Calyrex able to put on consistent double targeting damage, and those Thunder Waves not able to really kind of put in the work that Ryan was hoping for.
Yeah, that was one of the issues, the speed control. If it would have been something like Scary Face, that would have been able to have an impact on the opposing Regieleki, but because it's the electric type, Thunder Wave's not going to help there, and it was just outspeeding everything. Even when you were going for something like the Max Strike, which coming off of the Kyogre is pretty uncommon, but still not going to make you outspeed a Regieleki, that was just cancelled straight away by an Airstream. So that would have been okay if the Reflect would have gone up on the light screen turn instead, because on the turn that the Regieleki went for a Max Airstream, it probably wouldn't have been able to pick up the knockout on the Kyogre with that attack, so it would have had to go for Max Lightning, and that would have kept the Regieleki slower than the Zacian that would have switched in. So guessing the screen the wrong way around there. It would have been very good if the Regieleki was a special variant, but being the physical, just bypassing even the Assault Vest that was on the Kyogre as well, based on the damage from the Astral Barrage. So yeah, just getting the screen wrong. Could have been a bit more impactful with the Kyogre. You'd be able to make better use of your Dynamax. You'd have got off a second attack, but unfortunately Regieleki was just too strong there and just powered through the entire game.
Yeah, Regieleki, I think, got a vast majority of knockouts that it absolutely needed to, and it's going to propel Francesco up into continuing through this top cut. Of course, Ryan battled through all 9 of those rounds and then an extra 10th one now, so there is absolutely no doubt of his will to play Pokemon for a long period of time, and that is a lot of mental fortitude. We will be taking a quick break, though, and then we will be coming back with another top cut match, so please do not go anywhere.